Well, he's the East Midlands MP with international clout and certainly the only one who's seeing his budget rising every year. Alan Duncan, the Rutland and Melton MP, is a minister in the Department for International Development, which spent almost £9 billion last year. He's also the proud owner of Noodle, the Parliamentary Dog of the Year, and he's given us an exclusive insight into his work, Alan Duncan that is, not Noodle, to our political editor, John Hess.
At his office in Whitehall, Alan Duncan admits to having a personal Thunderbirds moment when international rescue calls. As Minister for International Development, he has to answer the real-life calls for humanitarian help.
I tease William Hague and say we're the Foreign Office with a budget. And yes, Thunderbirds is part of our portfolio. We go where there are disasters, and I think we are one of the best organisations in the world at getting people together to address those disasters.
This week, MPs were updated on the UK's response to the Philippines disaster.
For disasters, it's much more than blankets and tents. I mean, we have great stores of those in Dubai, which we can distribute very quickly. It has gone out of the news, but we've still got massive teams there. There's the best part of £100 million going into the Philippines, which will continue to go in the months ahead, for the reconstruction of properties and for the restoration of livelihoods and for the continued provision of food and, crucially, for disease control.
The international development budget next year tops £10 billion and is set to increase.
It's the right thing to do, and I think that everyone should be proud of it. And if you were to cut it to zero, it is not big enough to solve all the other problems that people say the UK has got.
What do you say when you're back in Rutland and Melton and people come up to you and say, Alan, how can we afford this international aid when we're seeing budgets, especially for local services, being squeezed so much?
And some people think we probably spend 10% of everything on international development. It's about 1%, you know. So it's a big amount of money, but it's not an enormous fraction of government spending. And yes, it gives us enormous respect because we are the first wealthy country to commit to spend 0.7% of our national income on the poorest in the world. We are, for instance, preparing for the risk of an earthquake in Nepal, in Kathmandu. We know that over the next few years there will be cyclones in India and floods in Bangladesh. And so you can prepare things, for instance, getting the right sort of buildings built so that when there is a flood they don't just automatically get washed away. And also we have a whole team of people and organisations who can leap into action at the press of a button in order to address the urgent humanitarian need caused by a disaster.
When I told people that I was coming to interview you, Alan, everyone said, you've got to ask Alan about Noodle. How is Noodle?
Noodle, my cockapoo, Westminster Dog of the Year. I'm very proud of her, and I go shopping now on a Saturday, and constituents come up and they don't look at me, they look down and say, "Hello, Noodle." So I just carry the lead now.
Alan Duncan making a strong case for overseas aid, but we've just been speaking about cuts to the fire service. Shouldn't charity begin at home, Nigel Mills?
Yes, I wouldn't be increasing our overseas aid budget at a time when we have so many problems here. It is right, clearly, that we play a big role in dealing with disasters like the Philippines, but I can't justify spending that level of taxpayers' money at a time like this. And there's a real fear that actually as we go chasing around to meet that target, we end up funding some very marginal projects that end up being a waste of that money. I would have held back that increase until we've fixed our own problem.
But this is government policy, and this is clearly what Alan Duncan's job involves.
Yes, I mean that was a policy we had in our manifesto. I just think it's the wrong thing at the wrong time.
OK, well this is an area of spending that David Cameron has vowed to protect, and in fact as we just heard, the budget is going up. What do you think of that, John?
Well, it's all about David Cameron and Alan Duncan trying to reposition the Tory party not as being the nasty party. But what's happening? He mentioned Nepal. Actually, most of the money in Nepal is going on road building in the capital city, and what we've done this year is double the expenditure on projects in each of the countries we're in, just this year. Well, there's no cost controls. It's spend, spend, spend. Money's been thrown away, and what we'll find in the next couple of years is audit reports saying badly spent. The staff there have just been told, get spending, because the government wants to show how generous it is.
Well,
I don't think that's good government.
Cut the budget? What's the answer?
Well, at the moment, we should be freezing the budget.
Yeah, I agree. We're trying to raise this far too high, far too fast. We should be focusing on things that really need doing, but not chasing marginal projects around the world.
What about soft power, though? Because Alan Duncan was talking about that, and that gives us some clout, doesn't it?
Well, I guess that's the theory. I mean, actually, we deliver a lot of this through partner organisations. A lot goes through the German Development Agency. So, yeah, the people who receive the benefits of those projects don't even know it's the UK doing it, actually. So, yes, I can see some argument for some soft power. It's right that we play our share, as I say, in disasters and at real problem spots, but I think the amount we're spending is just too much.
That soft power, though, means that the aid's actually value for money, doesn't it? It wins us friends abroad.
Good spent aid is value for money. The problem is the government has literally doubled the spending this year. It's just spend, 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 throwing money at any project. There is no cost control. There is no priority within it. And frankly, we're literally pouring money down the drain.
OK, well, what do you think about overseas aid? Should we be cutting back on that like everything else, or do people worse off than ourselves still deserve our help? We've been in Nottingham to find out.
They want to look after their own before they start doing things like that, don't they?
I don't think you can ever give too much, despite the fact that obviously the country is short of money itself. But there's an awful lot of people in a lot worse condition than we are, so it's something that needs to be spent but monitored very carefully to make sure it goes to the right people.
If we've got the money to be able to do it, it's good to be able to use it to give it to someone else for charity.
Rain it's in, we have people this time of the year can't even afford to put the heating on, and I just lost a friend through a heart attack, and his post-mortem's been put back because of the amount of people that have died since we've had the cold snap put in. And when you see things like India putting rockets in space, and we are not looking after our own and giving them money that will help subsidise other things, plus the fact over the years a lot of the funding we put in there gets looted, stolen, taken out, and never gets to the right people. So, yeah, it needs pulling back. Big time.
My goodness me, it can never be too much, can it, I suppose? When you look at the Philippines and what's going on there. But I suppose, like everybody, if you're human, you think, ouch, we're in a mess here as well.
So many people there backing the concept of international aid, but one chap very worried about winter deaths in this country. Is that something you're worried about in Bassetlaw, John?
It's a problem everywhere. It's a problem in Bassetlaw. And this is why energy bills are so critical. There are people not switching on their energy because they can't afford to. Vulnerable elderly pensioners. People are dying, and unnecessarily.
So that's really, I guess, what gets to people, isn't it? That we're giving money abroad. In fact, we actually give more money than America when people are very concerned about putting their own heating on or choosing whether to heat or eat.
Yes, I think that's why we should be using some of that money to help our own people. I mean, hopefully the Chancellor in his autumn statement next week will announce some reductions to the green taxes, which should bring some of the bills down.
What would you say to him he should be doing, though, right now, in his autumn statement, as you said?
Well, I think that is the one thing that's captured the public mood, the level of energy bills, and that's one thing we can do, is to reroute those taxes so we're not forcing bills up, even if the wholesale gas price goes up around the world. There's not that much we can do on that, but actually we can say we'll reduce that £130 that's on people's bills that we've chosen to put there.
People are hoping that something will be done in that autumn statement. What would you say, John? What do you think should be done?
We should be cutting the bills. I mean, people can't afford the bills, and these energy companies, I mean, I would renationalise them if it was left to me. But if we can't do that, if there's not a consensus, at least we should be forcing them to reduce the bills. They're making ridiculous amounts of profit at our expense, and the most vulnerable in society, it's hitting them the hardest, and people are dying because of it.
Renationalising them isn't going to happen, really, I don't think, Nigel, is it? Or
I don't think your experience of nationalised utilities was actually that positive. But I mean, clearly the market hasn't worked as it should. We need more competition in that, and that's something that we have to get right.
OK, well, not long to find out what his autumn statement will provide.